We shall move to questions without notice. Are there any questions? And I give the call to the Honourable the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Over the past week, I've spoken to hundreds of hard-working Australians across every corner of our country that have had one question they want to ask of the Prime Minister. Why did the Albanese Labor government lie to Australians about plans to tax them more?
Call to the Prime Minister.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. Well, I've spoken to a lot of Australians over the last week as well.
Order.
10 days ago,
Order, members on my left.
I spoke with Mika, Matt and their dog Pikelet here at Kingston. They bought a home of their own in Canberra using just a 5% deposit. There's some of the 250,000 first-time buyers.
The Prime Minister will pause. We're just going to have some silence. The Leader of the Opposition was heard in silence. I made sure the House was. We're not starting off on this bad foot. Member for Cook, you are now warned. That kind of yelling out is not going to happen today. Prime Minister.
They are some of the 250,000 first-home buyers who've done exactly the same, got into their first home. A few days later, I was at the Housing Australia Future Fund, the HAF site, in Melbourne, in Rosanna, which I visited last year with the member for Jagga Jagga when it was a building site. This year it is a site with 45 homes with people moving into them. Right where the railway station is, right where the shops are there at Rosanna. In Hobart, with Premier Rockcliffe, we spoke about the more than 1,000 homes that will be built on the Defence Land site there on the edge of the Derwent. In central Perth, we saw the 219 apartments over 29 floors which are about to be fitted out, including 110 social and affordable homes which are being built. At Prospects Corner, I met Harry and Erin, who just 4 weeks ago moved into their own apartment built by the HAF. That day, Erin summed it up simply and powerfully. It's really life-changing. And we met another young woman as well who'd been a beneficiary of the Help to Buy scheme, had got into her own first home as a result. Now, over our 4 years, we've thrown everything at housing supply, and it is making a difference. But there is more to do. And that's why we're reforming negative gearing and capital gains, opening aspiration to a generation who are being locked out. Our changes are pro-aspiration and they are pro-supply.
Order.
And perhaps he might like to speak to the next leader of the Liberal Party who said this: I feel the anger regularly from young Australians who feel locked out of the housing market. Red-hot anger, frustration, also a sense of despair that they can't get a stake in the country, that they can't afford a home. Again, we've got to listen to what they say. Good advice from the member for Canning. You might like to watch him just behind you.
Has concluded. Before I call the member for Macquarie, the Leader of the Opposition used an unparliamentary term during that question, so I'm just reminding everyone the same rules will apply that I did last week regarding using the word lie. Give the call to the member for Macquarie.
Thank you, Speaker. My question's to the Treasurer. How will the Albanese Labor government's tax reforms benefit Australian workers, first-home buyers and businesses?
Order. No,
how does this compare?
The member for Macquarie will begin her question again. We're not going to have interjections, just as I called them up on when a member from the opposition is asking questions. We're not going to have interjections. We're going to reset. Everyone's going to hear their question in silence, including the Speaker, because if I can't hear the question, I won't be able to take actions down the line. So, the member for Macquarie will begin her question again. And
Thank you,
there will be no
Speaker. My question's to the Treasurer. How will the Albanese Labor government's tax reforms benefit Australian workers, first-home buyers and businesses? How does this compare to other approaches?
Call to the Treasurer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and thank you to the member for Macquarie, not just for her question, but for the very substantial small business experience that she brings to this parliament, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, the tax reform package at the core of the government's fifth budget was about three main things: making it easier for people to buy their first home, cutting income taxes for 13 million Australian workers, and better aligning the tax treatment between people who work and people who earn their income in other legitimate ways. And a really important part of that budget was that tax cut for 13.3 million Australians, the Working Australian Tax Offset, Mr Speaker. It's targeted to workers. It represents the most meaningful permanent increase to the effective tax-free threshold since Labor last increased it more than a decade ago, Mr Speaker. But it's not the only way that we're cutting income taxes. We're cutting income taxes 5 different times in 3 different ways. We've got the tax cuts already legislated, including another round in July this year and another round after that in July next year. Those opposite voted against those tax cuts. We've got a $1,000 instant deduction next financial year, and now we've got the Working Australian Tax Offset they're announced in the budget. Now, altogether, our 5 different tax cuts will mean the average worker will benefit by up to $2,816 in 2028. We're also delivering over $3.5 billion in new measures to lower taxes for businesses, and we're reducing compliance costs by more than $10 billion a year, Mr Speaker. This is what the budget was all about. Now, on Thursday in this parliament, we'll be introducing legislation to give effect to these tax cuts: the standard deduction, the Working Australian Tax Offset, and the core elements of the changes to negative gearing and capital gains. And we will learn on Thursday whether they've learned the lesson from the last election. The last time this parliament cut taxes, those opposite voted against it, said if they won the election that they would repeal those tax cuts, Mr Speaker. We will learn on Thursday whether they've learned anything from the last election, whether they've changed a bit, Mr Speaker, in recent times. What we already know is that there are 2 kinds of people in this parliament, Mr Speaker. People who see the issues in the housing market for young people and want to fix them, and people who see those issues and want to do absolutely nothing about it. People who see the social and economic and political division and dislocation around the world and want to avoid it, versus those who want to copy it, Mr Speaker. People who see aspiration as the birthright of every single Australian, and those who see aspiration as the exclusive preserve of people who are already doing it very well. Thursday, when the legislation is introduced, will be another test for those opposite, Mr Speaker. This time they should vote for tax cuts.
Has concluded. The member for Petrie is warned. The member for Goldstein has the call.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, my question is to the Treasurer. Andrew from Parramatta founded a start-up. He started his business in 2015 and sold it in 2020 for $35.8 million. Andrew, like so many Australians, said that the new capital gains tax regime, quote, doesn't interact well with small businesses. Andrew said, and I quote, "Start-ups and some small businesses are a real concern, and the point that many small businesses have been making is valid." Did the Treasurer endorse the Cabinet Secretary's position?
Order. Members on my left, when the House settles. Order. Leader of the Opposition. The Minister for Workplace Relations. The Minister for Workplace Relations is warned. Treasurer has the call.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I'm reminded that the last time the Shadow Treasurer tried to cite an example, this time at the National Press Club, it turned out the person that he had based his entire speech around was more than likely exempt or able to access very considerable concessions and carve-outs, Mr Speaker. So the last time he got up here all puffed up with self-importance, Mr Speaker, but at the National Press Club he used an example who was able to access one of the 4 concessions and carve-outs for small businesses that we are not changing, Mr Speaker. So you forgive me for taking with a grain of salt anything that the Shadow Treasurer says when he tries to quote specific examples in the parliament, Mr Speaker. Now, when it comes to the changes that the Shadow Treasurer is asking me about, I remind him of somebody who said this, and I'm quoting, "There's no intergenerational justice in such preferential arrangements." Who also said, that was a quote from an author of a book, who also said in this parliament, "Today it's time to be honest. The tax system is screwing over young Australians.
Order.
It favours well-off established interests against those trying to get ahead. People who can predominantly live off income from their assets can pay very little tax and get discounts on capital gains from increases in asset values." The same person says young Australians need to demand a fairer tax system where they aren't the only ones carrying the burden to cover the cost of Australia, Mr Speaker.
Order. The members on my right will cease objecting so I can hear from the manager.
Speaker, relevance. It was an incredibly direct question. Does the Treasurer endorse the Cabinet Secretary's position? Can't get more straightforward than that. And he's been quoting from a book now where 1 minute 30 seconds is in.
Well, there's nothing against the standing orders for the Treasurer quoting from a book. I don't know who the author of this book is. I may have a suspicion, but the Treasurer needs to make sure the quote that he is referring to, because the manager is correct. He was asked a question, but there was a bit of a preamble in there about the scenario. So, just if the member for Gippsland is not helping, so just going to make sure whatever this quote is relating to in direct relevance about what the question he was asked. Treasurer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Of course I endorse and support the great work of the member for Parramatta, and I also support the great work of the Shadow Treasurer who wrote this, Mr Speaker. He said, "When people can earn more and be taxed less because of the holding of assets over income, it rewards capital interests against labour, and that means that you entrench those interests and you break apart what I think is one of the fundamental principles that has made this nation successful and strong, which is turn to the next generation and say you get your equal chance as well, Mr Speaker." So I support the member for Parramatta's great work as part of our team, and I support the comments that the Shadow Treasurer has made twice in this parliament and once in a book that I might be the only one who's read, Mr Speaker. And the reason I raise this, Mr Speaker, in endorsing the member for Parramatta's work is because it says everything about the Shadow Treasurer, that he is now trying to weaponise a campaign against the very changes that he called for, Mr Speaker. And not by accident. He's come in here twice and he's written a book about how we have to deal with these issues in the housing market and in the tax system, Mr Speaker. And as I said, Mr Speaker, he'd want to be careful that the Daily Tally doesn't put him on the front of the paper with a little hammer and sickle next to him, Mr Speaker, because this is exactly the problem that he's describing, that this government has the courage to try and fix.
The call to the honourable member for Aston.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Housing, Homelessness and Cities. How are the Albanese Labor government's housing reforms helping first home buyers trying to buy a home? Is the minister aware of any risks to this work?
The call to the Minister for Housing, the Minister for Homelessness and the Minister for Cities.
Thanks so much, Speaker, and I thank the member for Aston for her question. Mr Speaker, she has just ticked over 1,000 young people in her community into their first home with our government's backing, and plenty more where that came from. Speaker, too many Australians feel that the housing market is stacked against them. And what is so frustrating, especially for the young people of our country, is that they're doing all the right things. They're saving hard, they're working hard, they're studying hard, and yet still they turn up to auctions with the decks stacked against them. And, Speaker, that is what our government is seeking to change. That is why we are levelling the playing field for first home buyers through our budget housing reforms. Now, Speaker, for 25 years, the Sunday morning reports on Saturday's auctions have told us pretty much universally the same thing. It's first home buyers getting pipped by investors and more homes out of reach for young people. But for the last 2 weekends, Speaker, we have started to read something very, very different. Across the country, first home buyers are snapping up homes. Speaker, a single mum buying a home for her family in St Kilda East. Speaker, a young couple buying their first home in Yarraville, telling the paper that they'd given up on buying in that particular suburb. In Ardea, 4 first home buyers competing against each other at an auction, Speaker, all on a level playing field. And one auctioneer told the paper, Speaker, that the first home buyers of this country were up and about, and, Mr Speaker, that is exactly the point. Now, Speaker, by the time of the next election, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of young people around our country will be in their own home directly because of our government's first home ownership policies. And I want every single one of them to know, Speaker, that it was a Labor government that saw their ambition, that saw their aspiration and stepped in to help them realise it. Now, Speaker, I'm asked about alternatives and risks, and by God there is one on the table, because those opposite want to scrap all of the arrangements that are making this possible. Speaker, they want to get rid of the 5% deposit program because, according to them, this is about supporting the children of billionaires. They want to get rid of Help to Buy, Speaker, and now they want to scrap the level playing field that we are creating for first home buyers. Now, Speaker, what you're continually now seeing in this debate, we're for change, these people are for the broken status quo. And they are the only ones defending it, Speaker, increasingly the only people defending a broken system that locks people around this country out of home ownership. And I'm getting lots of backchat here, but, Speaker, I'd be pretty embarrassed too if I was raised in the party of home ownership that has turned on the young people of this country with the force that those opposite have. We're creating a fairer situation for the young people of this country, Speaker, but I want Australians to know every piece of this will be unwound by those opposite.
Before I call the honourable member for Warringah, I'm pleased to welcome to the House a delegation from Fallen Diggers, a non-profit organisation dedicating their time to finding the remains of missing Australians who served in World War I and World War II as part of our military personnel and are affording them an honourable burial. As guests of the member for Monash, welcome to Question Time. Give a call to the honourable member for Warringah.
Thank you. To the Treasurer. Many young Australians are angry at the government extending CGT changes beyond investment properties. After paying for high rents or just managing with a mortgage and paying taxes on their incomes, many are starting new businesses on the side or investing in shares to build a buffer, and they now feel blindsided. What modelling has the government done on extending CGT changes beyond investment property, and will you release it?
Call to the Treasurer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and thanks to the honourable member for her question. First of all, when it comes to young people, this is a budget for young people. It's a budget that recognises that for too long in this country, Mr Speaker, young people have been locked out of the housing market, as the Housing Minister just explained to the House, and we're taking some difficult decisions to address that. For too long now, too many young people have seen this aspiration of home ownership as something that belongs to somebody else, and we want to fix that. And we're here to make a difference in that regard, Mr Speaker. We're also helping to make sure that the tax system is fairer for workers, predominantly overwhelmingly young people. Young people overwhelmingly earn income from working. 84% of young people earn 90% or more of their taxable income from work, Mr Speaker. A couple of new numbers, Mr Speaker. And the honourable member asked me about modelling. Young people will be the biggest beneficiaries of the Working Australian tax offset. 2/3 of the recipients of our new tax cuts will be millennials and Gen Z in 27-28. Another new number, Mr Speaker, our $1,000 instant deduction. 2.3 million people under 35 will benefit, which is about 40% of beneficiaries, as well as the 75,000 extra households that we will turn from rental households into home owners, Mr Speaker. And so this is genuinely a budget for young people. Now, I'm asked about making sure that by replacing one sense of unfairness in the system, one distortion in the system, we don't want to replace it with another. And so dealing with this mistake that was made in 1999, which turbocharged house prices and decoupled incomes from house prices, we wanted to make sure that we didn't replace that mistake with another one, Mr Speaker. And so this is about reducing distortions in the market. Now, our changes, Mr Speaker, mean that some people will pay less tax. The current discount undercompensates some investors for inflation and overcompensates others. On average, over the past 20 years, the indexation approach would have been broadly neutral or even a bit more generous for shareholders. The proportion of Australians who own shares has declined by almost 20% since Howard and Costello made that mistake in 1999. This is why, Mr Speaker, UBS says from a big picture point of view, equities would become a relatively more competitive investment proposition. NAB says by the principles of optimal tax policy, this change should deliver an efficient, fair and robust regime once fully implemented. Westpac, the tax system did overly encourage leveraged investment in property over investing in other things, whether that was the stock market or a business or something else that produced income, Mr Speaker. And so that's why we're making these difficult changes. We know that they are contentious, but they are to benefit young people in the housing market and when it comes to income tax cuts, and that's the purpose of what we are trying to do.
Call to the honourable member for Hughes.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. How does the Albanese Labor government's budget strengthen Australia's fuel security? How does this compare with previous policies on fuel security?
Call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. I thank my honourable friend for the question. And in the face of the largest energy crisis in the history of the world, and in the face of one of our major refineries catching on fire at a very untimely development, I can report to the House that Australia has substantially more fuel today than we did on the day Iran was bombed, Mr Speaker. In fact, Mr Speaker, in relation to diesel, which the agriculture sector and regional Australia relies on so much, I'm pleased to tell the House that at 38 days' worth of holdings, it is the highest holding Australia has had since the minimum stock obligation came into force in 2023. With 43 days' worth of diesel and 31 days' worth of jet fuel, Mr Speaker, in fact, over the last 7 weeks, we have added, the government and industry working together, 1 billion litres of extra stock holding, which, by way of comparison, Mr Speaker, is as much as the opposition has promised to add between now and 2030. That's what we've added over the last 7 weeks, working with industry and working with refiners, Mr Speaker, to ensure that we are fuel secure in the most difficult circumstances possible, Mr Speaker. In relation to Export Finance Australia, we've underwritten 800 million litres of extra supply to Australia to provide us with a buffer. This is the approach the Albanese government has taken, and in the face of all the world has thrown at us, Australians working to ensure that they only use the fuel they need, the government working with industry to ensure that we have extra supplies, has seen Australia better placed than most countries, Mr Speaker. But we know that there's more to do. That's why the budget delivered by the Treasurer just a couple of weeks ago invested substantially in fuel security, because we believe that if you're going to improve our strategic reserves, if you're going to improve our sovereignty, then it makes sense to have a sovereign strategic reserve, Mr Speaker, held by the people for the people. A government-owned reserve to ensure that we are better placed in the future. Most members of the International Energy Agency have a government-owned reserve. Australia has been the exception. Now, this is a point of difference. This is the policy of the government, opposed by those opposite who do not think we should have a strategic government-owned reserve. The honourable member asked me how our approach compares with previous approaches. Well, we believe in a reserve held in our country for our country, not a reserve held for Australia in Texas, which was the situation we inherited. We believe in a government-owned reserve to ensure that we are well placed, Mr Speaker, a position opposed by those opposite. These are the approaches that the Albanese government has taken, which are a—
Minister will pause. Just going to ask the Leader of the Opposition to withdraw that.
I withdraw.
Thanks, Leader of the Opposition. The Minister for Climate Change and Energy in continuation.
Mr Speaker, this is the approach of the government, to work with industry for Australians and to ensure that we are better placed, as these international fuel crises, frankly, Mr Speaker, are likely to get more frequent and worse, not better and less frequent. Ensuring our strategic sovereign capability is at the heart of this government's budget and will always be so.
Call to the Shadow Treasurer.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Janet from Queensland has a child living with Down syndrome.
Order. 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 Members on my right, we're just going to reset. Same rules apply to both sides. The member for Goldstein will begin his question again and get to the question.
My question is to the Prime Minister. Janet from Queensland has a child living with Down syndrome. When she drew up her will many years ago, it included plans for a Testimony discretionary trust to protect her daughter. Now trusts like hers are set to be slugged with a new 30% tax. Prime Minister, how much more will families caring for people with disabilities have to pay in tax because of your budget of broken promises and higher taxes?
Call to the Prime Minister.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We've made it very clear that there are exemptions for vulnerable people. That was there in the budget announcement Tuesday night. And what the constituent from Brisbane shouldn't have to put up with is people promoting something in order to try to secure political advantage.
Stop scaring people.
By scaring vulnerable people.
Minister for Seniors. Call to the honourable member for Tangney.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Social Services. How is the Albanese Labor government working to reduce family, domestic and sexual violence? Thank you.
Give the call to the Honourable Minister for Social Services.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you so much to the member for Tangney. I know how passionately he cares about reducing family, domestic and sexual violence. Mr. Speaker, a lot's changed in the last 50 years in the way that we regard issues around family, domestic and sexual violence. Back in the day when we were first discussing whether we should fund refuges, there were people in this place who actually said we wouldn't because that would break up families. Yeah. We've seen so many advances because of the hard work of people on the front line, because of the advocates and, of course, because of the actions of successive governments. Last week, we launched the next phase of this work with the consultation on the next action plan to reduce family, domestic and sexual violence, because just as we've had many successes, we've also seen the changing environment. Tech-facilitated abuse is a new challenge for us. We're seeing rates of violence where both the perpetrator and the victim are under the age of 18, really increasing quite dramatically. So as our challenges evolve, we need to make sure that we are keeping up to date with the very best evidence applied to this problem so that we can truly end family, domestic and sexual violence. Mr. Speaker, no government has done more. We've invested an extra $4.4 billion under this Prime Minister in tackling this problem, and that includes very substantial investments like making the leaving violence payment permanent, the $1.2 billion we're putting into thousands of new homes in crisis and transitional housing, the $183 million we put into the recent budget to make our child support system safer, the first standalone plan to tackle family, domestic and sexual violence in First Nations communities, again $218 million in this budget, boosting funding for our 500 workers program by 70%, boosting funding for 1-800-RESPECT by 40%, and providing really practical work, investment directly into programs that assist men, programs that assist adolescents, dedicated funding for counselling for children who've been impacted by family and domestic violence, more than $80 million going into that. We've introduced 10 days paid family and domestic violence leave, and of course we've already passed legislation that makes sure that our social security system can't be weaponised by the perpetrators of family and domestic violence. Mr. Speaker, this is a challenge for every one of us. It's a challenge for both the Commonwealth Government and states and territories to show leadership, because of course governments have to lead here. But every Australian has the opportunity to make a difference when it comes to family, domestic and sexual violence, and every one of us has a responsibility to do so. Thank you.
Call to the honourable member for Maranoa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. 40 young Australian founders have written an open letter to the Prime Minister saying, and I quote, "Rather than back us, the Prime Minister has ambushed us with a massive tax increase, a tax that will hit us, the Australians we hire and the investors who believe in us the hardest. This aspiration ambush doesn't just impact tech startups either. It impacts every growing business in Australia. does the Prime Minister finally acknowledge that his budget of broken promises and higher taxes will hurt Australian small business owners?
Call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for his question. Indeed, we have in the budget $3.5 billion of support for small business in additional initiatives that we have taken. We've said very clearly that on Thursday we'll introduce legislation. It will have the core elements of tax cuts that will particularly benefit young Australians, the standard deduction that will particularly benefit young Australians, as well as the framework for the changes to capital gains tax and negative gearing. We've said in addition to that we will have an implementation legislation, and as part of that process we're consulting tech companies, start-ups, as well as the groups that you'd expect us to that have already been involved, the Council of Australian Small Business, the National Farmers Federation, ACCI, have all been involved in roundtables and have all been involved in the process, which is the normal way that you have tax reform. This is a reform. This is a reform that is necessary, and it's a reform that is necessary because, as it was called for by your shadow treasurer, for those very reasons. As I want to point out that indeed the treasurer isn't the only one who's read the book of the shadow treasurer. It's good reading. It's good reading because it puts the case for reform on capital gains tax and negative gearing very eloquently, and primarily it puts it in the context of intergenerational equity. The fact that young people are, to use the words of the shadow treasurer, getting screwed by the system. That is what he has said.
Order. The shadow treasurer will pause so I can hear from the manager.
Thanks, Speaker. It's just on relevance. It was about the letter written to the Prime Minister about the young entrepreneurs, not about the Shadow Minister's book.
The Leader of the House.
Mr Speaker, the final sentence of the question started with the words, does the Prime Minister finally acknowledge, and then had a characterisation of the entire budget, which opened the question wide.
And about hurting young Australians. So the Prime Minister is order. The Leader of the Opposition, the manager, was right. All right, we'll just continue then. The Prime Minister.
Yes, Mr Speaker. When it comes to the young people, which is what the question went to, and the impact of the budget, as the Shadow Treasurer has said, just to confirm that I've looked at this book. It's time to be honest. The tax system is screwing over young Australians. That's what it says. That's what it says.
Members on my left.
Instead, it favours well-off, established interests against those trying to get ahead.
There is far too much. The member for Forrest, he can have some time out. He's for 3 hours. If you're asked to leave by the Speaker, you definitely do not give commentary on the way out. It is a serious offence. If that occurs again, I'll be left no other option but to name members. Prime Minister has 24 seconds remaining.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. The fact is that there are people over the years, fair income people from those opposite, who have said, whether it be those who are still here, or people like the former member for Menzies, who said current tax settings tilt incentives towards investors, particularly in existing stock. They reward bidding rather than building. Is exactly right, the former member for Menzies.
Call to the honourable member for Macon.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Deputy Prime Minister. How is the Albanese Labor government securing well-paid jobs in South Australia through historic investments in defence? What indecision and uncertainty has this previously faced?
Call to the Minister of Defence and the Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, can I thank the member for his question and acknowledge his advocacy on behalf of Australia's defence industry in his home state of South Australia. Later this month, life of type extension work will begin on our Collins-class submarines, which in the journey of the most capable submarine that our nation has ever operated is really a very significant moment. But we get to this moment via a litany of defence failures on the part of the Liberals when they were in government. Back in 2021, on the very day that the Morrison government announced a change of plans for our future submarine capability, the Liberals also announced a life-of-type extension of the Collins class, which would have seen it become interoperable with the attack-class submarines which they had just cancelled, which is to say that the Collins-class sustainment planning team literally did not get the AUKUS memo. I mean, this was breathtaking incompetence on the part of the former government. Now, when we came to government, we knew that this plan was in trouble. We commissioned Gloria Valdez to have a look at it. She found that it was horribly misguided. We also knew that it was chronically underfunded. The Liberals had set aside just $6 billion to do the entire job. Now, by contrast, in the budget and the defence strategy that we announced a month ago, we have put aside $11 billion to do the life-of-type extension of Collins over just the next 10 years, and the work goes beyond that. The plan will make Collins a pathway to operating our future nuclear-powered submarines, and in the meantime it will see an increased availability of the Collins class in the here and now. The Collins LOTE will underpin around 1,400 jobs at the Osborne Naval Shipyard in Adelaide, and along with the work to construct our future submarines and our future frigates, this will see 10,000 well-paid, secure jobs at Osborne, making it easily the largest industrial facility in the country. Now, this has been a difficult set of decisions because we have had to clean up a monumental Liberal mess. But the result is that the Collins-class submarine will continue to be a potent capability serving all Australians for decades to come.
Give the call to the honourable member for Moncrieff.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Aaron has written in about how Labor's tax changes will affect him. He says, quote, "I'm 39 and supporting a young family with 2 children. I've been carefully investing in various high-growth assets over the last 10 years so that we may one day afford the Australian dream, our own home. These tax changes will be a disaster for families that have been building on a set of rules that are now being rug-pulled." End quote. Prime Minister, why is Labor's budget of broken promises and higher taxes punishing Aaron and his family, who are just trying to get ahead?
Call to the Prime Minister.
Thanks very much. I thank the member for her question. We want Aaron and his family to have a roof over their head. Aaron is 37 years old.
On my left.
39 years old. 39 years old. So chances are Aaron's been in the workforce for 20 years but has been unable to secure his own roof over his head. It is precisely because of those circumstances of people like Aaron that we want them to aspire and get ahead. Not just aspiration for some, aspiration for all. That is what we on this side of the chamber stand for. And let me say this. Someone who knows something about housing, a fellow called Harry Triguboff, said this. Last weekend identified positive proposed changes to capital gains tax and negative gearing for brand new property. Buyers are pivoting from the share market back into property. That's the direct result of the budget. Brand new apartments are now top of the list for investors. So what is happening?
Order.
What is happening is precisely what these reforms are aimed at. If you want to get ahead, you can still invest in negative gearing. You can still get a 50% capital gains tax discount, but as well as building your own assets and your own wealth, you'll be building the assets and the wealth of the nation. That is precisely what it's about. And meanwhile, Aaron, who's been in the workforce for 20 years, if Aaron goes to the auction next Saturday, he won't be standing there competing against someone who has, because they are an investor, going for their 10th house or their 12th house, who has as well, if they have to, go that extra $20,000 or $50,000 in order to win at the auction. You know why they can do that? Because all of the taxpayers, including Aaron, are paying for the benefit to them. That's why they can do it. So instead of that, as a first home buyer, which Aaron will be, he has a real shot. We're about helping people like Aaron. You're about keeping them down.
Order. Order. The Minister for Pacific Island Affairs and Defence Industry will cease ejecting. Just add a couple more people to the warnings list. That will be the member for Moncrieff now, who had a good go, and the member for Casey. So the people on warnings are the member for Bowman, the Minister for Employment, the member for Petrie, and the members for Moncrieff and Casey. Thank the member for Riverina. Okay. We will now hear from the honourable member for Macarthur.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Immigration. How is the Albanese Labor government reforming our migration system? How does this compare to other approaches to migration?
Call to the Leader of the House and the Minister for Immigration and Citizenship.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. I thank the member for Macarthur both for the incredible work that he does in South West Sydney, but also work that he does for every one of his constituents, no matter where they come from. In Australia, we've seen net overseas migration fall to 45% below where it peaked. And those opposite seem reluctant to acknowledge that when the peak occurred, every single one of the settings were the settings that they had left in place when the peak occurred. The reduction of 45% in net overseas migration, the largest part of the growth that we had to deal with had been in student visas. And so when we brought forward legislation, not only to be able to cap the number of student visas, but also to be able to link the number of student visas to student accommodation, link it directly to housing, what did those opposite do? They opposed the legislation. We also, in the budget, have flagged further changes we'll be making with respect to working holiday makers. And yet those opposite, it was the National Party before the election that said they would be opposed to any changes to reducing the number of working holiday makers. But in the budget reply speech, the Leader of the Opposition took a step that I haven't seen a political leader take in this place before. And a lot's been made of what he said about permanent residents. But there's one permanent resident he seems to like, in that the permanent resident, Senator Pauline Hanson, is a permanent resident inside his head, living rent-free. Because he introduced a new argument that I've not seen before, from any leader in this parliament, and that was to claim that somehow you will be more worthy as an Australian if you come from a liberal democracy. Somehow you will be more worthy based on where you're from.
The minister will pause. The Minister for Small Business. I'm just going to order the member for Caldwell. I'm just going to invite the Leader of the Opposition to withdraw that statement again.
I withdraw.
I thank the Leader of the Opposition, and we will continue with the Leader of the House.
a claim that you would be more worthy to be an Australian based on where you're from, not who you are. And I remind the Leader of the Opposition of some of the people who've come to this nation who are not from Liberal democracies. He wanted to refer to the Snowy River scheme. I'd remind him the number of people who came post-World War II who had been living in fascist Europe, not living in a Liberal democracy. The number of people who'd come from the former USSR, including Australia's proud Ukrainian community, who had not come from a Liberal democracy. The members of Australia's Chinese community, who ever since the days of the gold rush have been coming and building this country and not from a Liberal democracy. The Vietnamese community, not from a Liberal democracy. We love Australia for the nation that we are, not a warped idea turning people against each other.
Order. When the House comes to order, we'll hear from the honourable member for Ryan.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Could the Prime Minister please inform the House if there were lobbyists or representatives of the gas industry at the Labor Party's Budget Night fundraiser?
That is technically not allowed, and I only say that under standing orders and previous practice, party affairs and matters of particularly of the nature raised have always been ruled out of question. So perhaps the member for Ryan would wish to rephrase her question, but she won't be able to ask that sort of question to any minister or the Prime Minister. The member for Ryan has the call.
It goes to the Prime Minister's official duties on Budget Night and his attendance at meetings with organisations and people seeking to influence government policy. I'm just asking on behalf of the Australian people who need to know.
I don't think we want to go down that road, member for Ryan. Look, it is pretty clear that those questions aren't allowed, but if the Prime Minister wishes to give some comments to the House regarding that topic, I don't want to open this up too wide, but the Prime Minister can address.
2 points on the topic. The largest ever corporate donation that I'm aware of was to the Greens political party from the operator of a website and an accommodation search. So I make that point, number one. The second point I make is that before I became Prime Minister, under the former government, there were fundraisers in this building, in ministerial offices, in the Prime Minister office and in the Speaker's office. I, together with the Speaker of the House of Representatives and the President, after I wrote to them, that has been stopped, and that is a good thing.
Call to the honourable member for Moore.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Small Business. How is the Albanese Labor government continuing to deliver for Australian small businesses in the face of global uncertainty?
Call to the Minister for International Development, Minister for Small Business and Minister for Multicultural Affairs.
Thank you so much, Mr Speaker, and I do want to thank the member for Moore for his question. On Thursday, the member for Moore and I visited Industrial Automation in Joondalup, and Industrial Automation is the brainchild of Hank, and for over a decade, Hank's been helping local communities to adopt technology that saves them both time and money. And businesses like Hank's are the very reason that we're focused on supporting Australia's 2.7 million small businesses. Now, since we came into office in 2022, Mr Speaker, we've worked diligently to deliver for small business. And I want to go through all the lists, but it's quite significant, so I'm going to try and get through it all in under 3 minutes, Mr Speaker. We've made the payment times reporting regime work for small businesses with faster payment times, and we've issued our first ever fine. We're taking steps to streamline the National Construction Code. Our free TAFE has increased the pool of skilled workers for small business. We've incentivised more apprenticeships. We've halved the fuel excise and reduced the heavy vehicle road user charge to help buffer the impacts of global events. We've strengthened the enforcement of the Franchising Code of Conduct. We've increased penalties for unfair contract terms and extended protections for unfair trading practices. We've invested in digital solutions and cyber resilience and small business debt helpline. We've made changes to the Commonwealth procurement rules to ensure Australian small businesses get a bigger slice of government procurement opportunities. And that's not all. Last week's budget goes even further to ensuring small businesses have the settings that they need, not just to survive but also to thrive. And it includes $3.5 billion in new measures that deliver business tax relief to support resilience, investment and growth. So for small businesses, this includes making the $20,000 instant asset write-off permanent, making the 2-year loss carryback permanent, introducing loss refundability to support start-up businesses, expanding tax incentives for venture capital, reforming the research and development tax incentive, including allowing young businesses greater access to the refundable tax offset as they grow, reducing red tape across the economy with the Tell Us Once approach, and that's going to cut regulatory costs by $10.2 billion, removing another 497 nuisance tariffs, saving businesses around $127 million in compliance costs, tax cuts for sole traders, including the new $250 Working Australians tax offset, further work with states on payroll tax and retail tenancy harmonisation, and programs to ensure small businesses benefit from the uptake of digital skills. All things we've done in just 4 years. We know there's more to do, and we'll continue to back small businesses because small businesses back Australia.
Give a call to the honourable member for Herbert.
My question is to the Prime Minister. I referred to the Prime Minister's broken promise to ration allied health services for veterans at $5,000 per year. How many veterans will be out of pocket and forced to pay for another Labor broken promise because the Prime Minister has chosen to rip the guts out of allied health services for our veterans?
Call to the Prime Minister.
I'll make a couple of points, Mr Speaker, before I hand over to the Minister, which is one of the things I'm really conscious of is support for our veterans. And indeed, when we came to office, one of the reasons why the member for Calare is sitting up there and not over there, apart from having the good common sense to lead the National Party, is because of what they did to Veterans Affairs when they were in government in terms of the budget. When we came to government, we inherited a backlog of almost 42,000 veteran compensation claims that hadn't even been looked at by someone. This had real-life consequences for veterans and their families. We invested in DVA, and as a result now, when a veteran makes a claim, it's in front of someone within 14 days. DVA is processing claims at record levels. This is the most critical thing, as well as the hubs that we've created as well, providing services for veterans. But I'll ask the Minister if he wants to add something.
The Minister for Veterans Affairs and the Minister for Defence Personnel.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you, Prime Minister. The budget contained an additional $169.7 million to increase the fees going to allied health providers to support our veterans. This is the biggest increase in 2 decades and will kick in July 2027. It's going to see physiotherapy services go from being paid $75.10 to $110 so veterans can access better services. The previous government had implemented their treatment cycle to constrain access to allied health services. So veterans had to keep going back to a GP after every 12 sessions. We're changing that to the $5,000 limit to make it easier for veterans. And importantly, we're ensuring that veterans that have a genuine clinical need to go over it will continue to have access to the allied health services that they require.
Has the Minister concluded his answer? Resume your seat so I can hear from the member for Herbert on his point of order.
Thank you, Speaker. I seek leave to table the recommendation from the Royal Commission. Veterans deserve better than this Albanese Labor lies. These are lies that you are peddling. It is ridiculous.
No, we'll get the. Before we go any further, we'll just get the leader to pause a moment, and we're going to get the member for Herbert to withdraw that last part.
I'm not withdrawing, Speaker, at all. The people will die because of this legislation. It is disgusting.
Order. No, I'll ask the. No. The Leader of the Opposition has followed my direction 2 occasions. I'm going to ask the member for Herbert to withdraw to follow the forms of the House.
I'm not withdrawing.
I'll have to deal with this matter, but the manager on a point of order.
Speaker, just to help with this matter, in your ruling last week, you said, I think it's in the best interest, both sides, not to be referring to any individuals, people or parties using that term. That's now, there is precedent where the now Minister for Health, I think he was the Deputy Manager of Opposition Business at the time, referred to government lies. Now, I think as I was listening to the member for Herbert, he referred to the Albanese Labor government's lies, and at the time, the now Minister for Home Affairs and then the Manager of Opposition Business said this. On that point, this was in defence of what the now Minister for Health said. On that point,
Order. Members on my right.
I'm just trying to do my best to help here.
Order.
On that point, and this is the now Manager of Opposition Business, on that point, the phrase "with respect to Labor" has been used many times. So, Speaker, just trying to help, because I think the member for Herbert was referring to the Albanese Labor government.
Yeah, and Speaker Snedden in 1980 ruled that such a remark was out of order. So we can dance around this all we want. The Leader of the Opposition did follow my direction and assisted the House, as every other member has done. The member for Herbert, I know, was taking a different position here, but we need to be consistent, as all speakers have done, regarding that word. And there's countless examples that I can talk about, individuals or people, but we're not going down that path with me as Speaker. We're simply not going to travel that path. So I'll give the member for Herbert one more chance to assist the House and withdraw. The Prime Minister.
Yes, Mr Speaker, perhaps I can help. I have every respect for the member for Herbert as a former veteran, as we all do. But I would ask the Leader of the Opposition to ask his member to withdraw in accordance with.
We'll do this. The member for Herbert.
Otherwise, you'll get.
We're going to deal with this one at a time. Okay, that's okay. It's okay. We'll handle it. Don't worry. The Leader of the Opposition. We're going to deal with this.
Yes, Mr Speaker.
The Prime Minister.
I am trying to find a way through here in the interests of the decorum of the House. It's very important, and that is in the interests of the member for Lindsay as well, who I have visited his electorate with him and Herbert, and I know that the former member for Herbert was a Lindsay. I visited with him. I know that he's passionate about these issues, but it is really in the interests of the decorum, because otherwise you reach a point whereby you cannot have the Speaker's ruling be defied.
Okay, so the member for Herbert is refusing to withdraw that comment, leaves with no other choice but to name the member for Herbert. Call the Leader of the House.
Speaker, I move that the member be suspended from the services of the House.
Put the question. Those opinions say aye. Against no. I think the ayes have it. Division required. Lock the doors. The question is the member for Herbert be suspended from the services of the House. The ayes will pass to the right of the chair and the noes to the left. I appoint the honourable members for Werriwa and Bean as tellers for the ayes and the honourable members for Capricornia and Monash as tellers for the noes. Order. The result of the division is ayes 105, noes 39. The matter is resolved in the affirmative. The member shall remove himself from the services of the House for 24 hours. Order. I'll just wait for members to return to their seats quickly and as quietly as possible. The call to the honourable member for Blair.
Speaker, my question is to the Minister for Workplace Relations.
No, we've moved on. We've moved on. We've moved on. We've moved on. I've given the call to the member for Blair.
Speaker, my question is to the Minister for Workplace Relations. How does the Albanese Labor government's budget build on the government's commitment to backing Australian workers? How does this compare to other approaches to supporting Australian workers?
Call to the Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations.
Thank you, Speaker. I'd like to thank the member for Blair for that question, but also his commitment to hard-working Australians in his electorate, but right around the country. Now, this budget is all about supporting workers and levelling the playing field. Because of this Labor government, hard-working Australians will be receiving 5 tax cuts, meaning the average worker will benefit up to $2,800. From the 1st of July this year, every Australian taxpayer will receive a tax cut, and again on the 1st of July next year. Now, the Albanese government is delivering a new $250 tax cut to the 13.3 million workers in this budget through introducing the new Working Australians tax offset. We're also introducing a $1,000 instant deduction to provide tax relief for workers and making tax time easier. Now, these tax cuts build on our commitment to help working Australians earn more and keep more of what they earn. Of course, it's this Labor government that has backed the lowest paid workers at the Fair Work Commission each and every year. And this year, Labor has again made a submission advocating to the Commission for an economically sustainable real wage increase for workers on minimum award wages. And under our government, the minimum award wages increased by more than $9,000, directly helping 2.7 million award-reliant workers. Now, we've also introduced significant reforms to reinvigorate enterprise bargaining, and enterprise bargaining continues to be a source of wages growth for Australian workers. Workers covered by enterprise agreements are enjoying the strongest wages growth in the nation, rising by 9.6% on average in the latest ABS data. Now, these are all part of our plan to ease cost of living pressures and help Australians earn more and keep more of what they earn. But, Mr Speaker, I am asked if there are any other approaches. And, of course, we do have a different approach from those opposite. Of course, when they had the chance to vote for tax cuts for working Australians, what did they do? They voted against working Australians. But they didn't stop there. They took that promise to an election to up the taxes on working Australians. And of course, they voted against every single measure we've taken to support working Australians. In fact, I just heard the Leader of the Opposition argue against our advocacy for a minimum wage increase. Well, they need to be honest. Do they support low-working Australians? Low-working...
Order. The member
Does he support the lowest paid workers in Australia, or will he just back vested interests?
Prime Minister. Order. The Prime Minister has the call.
I ask further questions to be placed on notice paper.
Just got some reports that I will